Welcome to We Be Watching, where we break down our favorite and not so favorite films and TV shows. I'm Britni Danielle, writer, pop cultural critic, and proud comic book normie.
And I'm Rahja, and I have a specific set of skills.
Okay. Today...
Stupid.
Today, we are here to talk about episode 3 of WandaVision, now in color. But remember, we're going to be breaking it all down. So that means if you have not watched episode 3, as a matter of fact, if you have not watched episodes 1 through 3, you might want to go back, pause on this podcast, catch up on the show. Good thing they're very short episodes, and then join us here for our conversation. Also, you can join us on Instagram and Twitter to extend this conversation, to share your thoughts, to follow us, to big up, to just give us a little bit of encouragement for our podcast, and share your theories at We Be Watching Pod. That's once again on Instagram and Twitter at We Be Watching Pod. Before we get into breaking it all down, Rahja, what were your first impressions of this episode?
Well, this episode definitely brings us into some new territory. My first impression was that it was going to kind of solidify more things from the first and second episode and try to move us a lot further along into the story aspect of the series, more so like what is actually happening. But there still are a lot of questions. So I should say a lot of the series for me was not all that important, except for the few key moments that occur at various moments, and then the ending, which had a lot of significance. So yeah, third episode, I mean, it was a good episode, but there was not a lot to cling on to until you get basically through the whole thing.
It was definitely an entertaining episode. We clearly moved into the 70s. Episode 1, we had 50s sitcom vibes. Episode 2, we moved into the 60s. And now we're firmly in the 70s. Just kind of watching the intro, you get sort of classic 70s sitcom. I'm going to keep saying the word vibe, so my bad. Classic 70s sitcom vibes from the Brady Bunch. But I know Rahja spent an inordinate amount of time kind of going scene by scene, frame by frame in the intro. So I'm going to let him break down some other references that he picked out.
Yeah, so the song is actually a variation of the Partridge Family. The imagery, there are like the wording when it shows them in the little hexagons. It's indicative of the Brady Bunch, where you have the different faces in those shapes. Just the only difference is the type of shape, basically. When the title WandaVision splits, that's actually from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. The scenery looks a lot like Three's Company, especially when they're like riding on the bikes. And then it just shows, everyone who's involved that's in the actual series. They also show Vision walking and reading a book where the title is Pregnancy, I believe. So, it definitely, the intro alludes to what's going to happen in the show. It revolves around them cooking, like the song says, we're cooking up something, so that's like, creating babies, basically. We'll get to that in a moment. So there's definitely...
Shout out to Ashanti.
There's a lot of references, a lot of 70s sitcom series references. So I thought that was very interesting that they incorporated a lot of that. It's not just one sitcom that they stuck with.
Yeah, I definitely got a little "come on, knock on my door" vibes from Three's Company. If you were a 90s kid or 80s kid who had Nick at Night, that means you also grew up on Three's Company, weirdly. Shout out to the Ropers. But yeah, so we're moving in the series. Like each episode is clearly moving us to another decade. So I fully expect us to be in the 80s next episode, but they're not moving time forward 10 years at a time. Right. So even though, all of these intros are increasingly moving us through TV history, what's happening on screen is not fast forwarding in that fast of a way. Although in this episode, things go from 0 to 100 real quick for Wanda and Vision and them babies.
Them babies.
Before we get into it, I wrote up a brief synopsis of what happens in this episode. And then we're going to go not quite scene by scene, but we're going to talk about a lot of the scenes that we think are important in both acts 1 and 2. But in episode 3, Wanda is pregnant, really pregnant. At the beginning of the episode, the doctor says she's 4 months along. Vision is freaked out and tries to learn as much as he can by speed reading books until he realizes the baby will be here much sooner than expected. My man Herbert Sherbert is malfunctioning and Agnes is being weird. Meanwhile, every time Wanda experiences a sensation, something crazy happens in the house. Butterflies appear when the baby starts kicking for the first time, and the kitchen goes completely haywire when she's having Braxton Hicks contractions. And when she really goes into labor, things get especially weird. Geraldine stops by for a visit and helps Wanda give birth. She has twins until Geraldine says the wrong thing and Wanda sends her home.
Sends her back.
All right. Take it away, Rahja.
Yeah, we start with the opening scene with them in the home, which is very Brady Bunch-ish as far as the setting goes. And you have the doctor there, and they are confirming the fact that Wanda is pregnant. And like, Britni said in the synopsis, she's 4 months along, and it's only been 12 hours since we last saw them. So that's definitely something to pay attention to as far as the timing aspect within the reality and creation is more so an, instantaneous type of thing as opposed to what normal people go through when it comes to like 9 months. And that pretty much wraps up that aspect of it. The doctor basically says like, oh, he's going to go on vacation, to Bermuda. There's some questions about the pregnancy that Vision has because, of course, he is an android. So he's trying to figure things out in that kind of way.
He's trying to be a human.
Right. Well, he's trying to find the rationality in everything that's going on, being that it just seems so, incredulous when it comes to this, Wanda being pregnant and being so far along, so he's like, when the doctor basically, he kind of low key, diminishes Wanda as a woman when he talks about, we like to refer to, the timing or the growth of the baby in fruit. And, it makes it real simple for women, basically. And, Wanda kind of, gives a look and is just like, what? Then this is where the practical aspect comes in with Vision, who's trying to ask questions that the doctor probably wouldn't even be able to answer because, this is not a normal pregnancy, being that it's moving so fast. He's like, oh, so what would the fruit be at 12 hours? Being that it's only been 12 hours, I guess, since they presumably did the do. I'm not sure.
Well, I think maybe 12 hours since they found out she was pregnant. Remember at the end of episode 2, she has the little baby bump, which is still very noticeable. It's a noticeable bump. But by the time we get to episode 3, and then by the time the doctor leaves and Vision comes back in the house from walking the doctor out, her belly is even bigger. Right. So now he's trying to figure out like mathematical equations for how much time they're going to have, because they're clearly not going to have 9 months. And I think he estimates that the baby will be here by Friday. Right. And we later realized that he was wrong and the babies were there today.
Right. Also, when Vision walks the doctor out, that's when he sees Herbert. He's just, supposed to be trimming the hedges, but he is cutting the gate for some reason, as if it's just like the thing to do, which we all know it's not. So that definitely was some type of glitch in the programming, I guess.
Not even the gate. My man Herbert Sherbert is just going ham on the brick wall, but he doesn't seem to realize like that he's cutting the brick wall, because he's cut past the bushes into the brick wall, and Vision is talking to him like, "What up, Herb?" And he's like, "Hey, Vision," and he's still like looking creepy and cutting into this wall. And I was like, "Damn, not my man Herbert Sherbert. They got him. He's in the Matrix too."
Right. So, and then Vision, steps back in the house. Of course, Wanda's pregnancy has accelerated that quickly, which, is strange, but okay, we're going to go with that. Then, they start getting a little bit more serious about the pregnancy because, time is of essence, so like we explained earlier, you have Vision trying to figure out mathematically, like what would be like, the probability or whatever of time that would pass before she actually gives birth. He's reading books about pregnancy. Wanda is actually, she uses her magic to build the crib in the kids' room. They also talk about the names. Vision says, I think it's Vision because he says Billy. Wanda's like, well, how about Tommy? It's a nice American name. And then, Vision's like, well, what about Billy? Shakespeare. And then he refers to Billy as, oh, it's the same name as William Shakespeare, which, theater, everyone's on stage, which is definitely a reference when it comes to this reality that's happening and where they're living. That's definitely something to pay attention to. So they kind of disagree on that, on the names or whatever, and then we kind of go from there. There's some kicking that occurs.
The kicking occurs while Wanda is setting up the nursery and Vision is reading about, nesting. And so while he's reading about nesting, which is like when a woman feels like she has to get everything ready for her babies, and Wanda's building a crib, she's putting up decorations, she's unpacking boxes, which, where did they get all this stuff in 12 hours?
Well, she creates stuff out of thin air, so
I guess. So they got all this stuff. She's getting the nursery together. She's painting the wall with a big blue and purple and white swan, with a blue and purple and white stork, which comes back later in the episode. Right. And as she's doing this, she feels kicks from the baby. And so Vision estimates that means she's about 6 months along, but at the same time, when she's feeling these kicks and she's in the middle of putting up these decorations, she's putting up
the mobile,
which is full of fake butterflies. They turn into real butterflies. Right. So that is one of the first indications that we get that, when Wanda feels something physically, it manifests out in the world too.
Right.
Which is something that happens big time later on.
And even she even says, like, just imagine, what's going to happen when she's actually giving birth. And we see what happens.
Yeah. She says that as she's going through Braxton Hicks contractions, which is quote fake labor. And when she first feels it, at the same time, Vision is like, oh, Braxton Hicks. And he starts spouting off information about the man who came up with Braxton Hicks contractions. Right. And she's like, oh my God, the kitchen is like,
everything is, all the appliances are turning on.
Right.
They have to run out of there because it's just way too much. And then as soon as they get out the room, the power cuts off. And she's like, oh, it stopped. It was like, really? Yes, it stopped because you're not in the same area, which also leads to the whole neighborhood's power goes out. So that's just from, a couple of contractions with Wanda and her powers, basically, so she's, we see that she's not able to control that. Stress definitely will lead to her powers going awry and this and that. And we basically see this going on throughout the whole episode.
Mm-hmm. And then she asked Vision to go check and see if whatever's happening in her house with the power going out, the appliances going awry, is happening across the neighborhood. And when he comes back to say like, yeah, the power looks like it's out, she wonders if people are going to like know that it's her because, they've been trying to hide this secret, their abilities, that they're not regular people and that Vision's not a person at all. And this is when something happens to
Right.
Vision. Vision comes in. At first, he's trying to reassure her that, nobody's going to really trace it back to her, trace it back to us. But then he starts to sort of put things together and like, something's not right here. And he mentions the Hearts, which were his boss and his wife, the man who nearly choked to death. He mentions Herb acting weird and cutting into the wall. And then he says, I think something's wrong. I think something's wrong here, Wanda. And then she looks, I wrote, she looks alarmed. And then she like, boop, she reboots him real fast, in my
Yeah, I
opinion.
don't.
She's just like, run that back, Vision. Because then he like quickly just,
This.
I don't know. To me, it's like he gets rebooted.
Yeah, in a way. I think the look on her face to me was not being alarmed, but more so scared and heavy with like denial of things, I guess, that could possibly be occurring and going wrong. And the fact that Vision is kind of recognizing that, and that's not something that she wants him to recognize, which brings me to the point where it doesn't seem as if Vision really knows. Like, we know he doesn't know what's going on to the fullest degree. He knows that there are certain anomalies and things like that. And he's basically just living, the role or living his life with Wanda. But I guess you can say the consequences or, real reality hasn't set in, or presumably he's just unaware, but he is noticing things. And she basically, like, she doesn't reverse him. She just blacks out that whole conversation, or that whole, him referring to the different things that have been happening. She just blocks it out. And then that scene starts over with him addressing it. Then he's more endearing and more comforting, with her, as if like that's basically that's what she wants. She doesn't want the stress. She doesn't want to, realize other things, basically. So she's just trying to live in that moment with him, without regard to, any issues or problems.
But do we think that she just blocks it out in her side of the conversation, or do you think like you clearly don't think like I think, like she does something maybe to Vision so that he like boom, he flips that switch and he goes back to a space where she wants him to be? Because we're still having this debate about, is Vision alive, or is Wanda sort of bringing him back in this reality that she's able to create and to some degree control, but clearly not control fully, as evidenced by just everything going wrong and going haywire.
Stress, anxiety,
when she feels things, when she gets stressed or she feels upset or she feels pain via childbirth, she's not able to control how her powers react. But is she able to control Vision to some degree? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I'm not too sure of where the series is going to go in that regard. I know in reference to the comic books, she can, well, even in the series, she creates things. So just like with the butterflies, that's life, they didn't just turn back into the mobile. She actually let them out the window. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that she basically brought him back to life, being that is one of her powers. We also see later in the episode where the stork that was a painting comes to life. So that's my theory. Also, when it comes to Vision in that scene, I think that Wanda doesn't like flip a switch on him. She just erases that that conversation just out the whole, like she basically does an edit. So she doesn't change Vision per se. She just edits that moment out, because as we can see, like it literally goes back to the scene. It doesn't reverse. It just starts over. And then he just says, the right things, basically the more endearing thing.
Yeah, but that would still be her doing something. In order to edit something out, you still have to go back. Like, she would still have to alter what he was going to say, because I don't think he was going to be like, oh, something's not right here or something's wrong here, and then just flip into like, but everything's okay here. Like, she, in my opinion, still has to do something to get to that edit point for him where, in my opinion, and we'll see, right? In my opinion, like, she's controlling that moment. And I don't know if it's just controlling it from her perspective or she's controlling it overall, because we know, as you say, she has these powers to bring things into life, butterflies, the stork, these babies, even though, you know, like you said last episode, Vision is an android. He's a robot, so he can't make human babies. And yet here are these human babies. And so I think this raises a lot of questions, at least for me, again, about what is going on here. And I think the show is really, I would say, is really brave, because if it weren't for this podcast and if it weren't for probably you, not that I wouldn't watch it, but I would be like less generous with trying to figure out like what's happening. I think the short episodes also make it more difficult. I don't think it's an easy show to watch,
Right.
because if you're just watching it on the surface of the show, it probably doesn't feel as entertaining as when you look at it as sort of not a comedy, but like I was listening to somebody talk about it. It's like kind of a horror, right? Like, they're stuck in this weird reality.
Madness is what it is.
It's madness. They're stuck in this weird reality. Some people are funny, but like, nobody is what they seem. My man Herbert Sherbert is cutting into a brick wall when he should be trimming his bushes. Agnes, we can get to her later because she comes in Act 2, but like, Agnes is up to something, in my opinion. Agnes ain't on the up and up. And so, sure, they have this like, oh yeah, Wanda and Vision love story. This is so cute. This is so sitcom-y. But like, when you look beneath that surface, this is some weird shit. And I think for casual viewers, of which I would be one of them if it had not been, again, for this show and for your comic book knowledge, I probably would not have. I would have probably been one of those people, because, you know, it's kind of split. It's like, you know, all the Marvel people are like into it and they're like, oh my God, this show is taking chances. This is so different. And then a lot of people who are just Disney Plus subscribers who are like, oh yeah, I watched Infinity War. Let me check this out. They're like, what is this? Even in talking about the podcast, I've had a lot of people hit me up like, yeah, no, that show is boring. I can't do it. And I think it's just because we don't have a lot of answers about what's happening.
There's a lot of source material in between all of this. So, you know, when you jump from the MCU into this, there's definitely a lot of source material that revolves around this series, which has not been explained or even alluded to. Even when you come from the movies, like her origin and this and that is very different from the comic books, on top of the fact that we see her as she's grown. Her and her brother are more so, you know, they're older. Like, we don't see them growing up. We don't see them. We only see like, okay, she goes through some stuff where she is, you know, hesitant to use her powers. She's afraid, and this and that. That's more so the big thing about Wanda, is that she was not confident in herself until she was with, who was it in Age of Ultron? I think she was with like Hawkeye, and he tells her like, we're going to fight, you know, through this and this and that. And she pretty much like basically sacrifices herself when she kills Ultron, and the city, her city falls basically. And Vision is there to actually save her life, which is where they, you know, create that bond moving forward. But yeah, a lot of things are not explained, even when it comes to her, period, as far as what we have seen in film thus far. So it's kind of hard to grasp what is going on, you know, like what are her powers really, being that they're exploring more of her power than what we've seen before. You know, in the previous movies, we see her like shooting energy beams and this and that. Whereas in the series,
we don't really see her a lot in the movies, and unless I forgot, which is again, Uncle Jerome, don't come for
Well,
me. We don't see her a lot in the movies manipulating and controlling
right.
reality,
This is definitely different.
which is one of her big main powers. Like Wanda can manipulate and control reality, which is why everybody is trying to figure out like if she's controlling this reality, or what actually is happening, because she has the ability and the power to do
Right.
so.
And not just reality, but a lot of, like, at this point, she has magical knowledge, which is something that we haven't seen in her power set prior to this. So it's very different from what you have seen or what they've shown her to be in the MCU, in contrast to where her powers stand now. So there's been a big leap. My question is, okay, so the time frame where, Endgame stops and then where we pick up, like, how far along is that time frame? What transpired in that time frame to put her into this place and have her, if she is creating this reality, make this reality and this and that. I know, we talked about the death of Vision, her having to kill him herself, and then, that gets reversed and Thanos does it for her, basically, right in front of her eyes, which is definitely a traumatic experience. So are we immediately after that, or has it been some time? Who has she spoken to in that time frame, and where did all of these new powers manifest, which could be something that gets explained. Comic book wise, it would have been Agnes who took her in and mentored her when it comes to actual magic, being that in the comic books, Agnes or Agatha Harkness is a witch. There's some holes that need to be filled.
I think one of the reasons we might have some of these holes, and I don't know, is industry Disney Plus magic, right? Like, because WandaVision was not supposed to be their first Marvel series out the gate. They were supposed to lead off with
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yes, they were supposed to lead off with Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I believe comes directly after Endgame in the time frame.
So.
And so I feel like they were going to use that to a lead in, or they were going to bridge the gap from Endgame to Disney Plus with that show, which seems like it's going to be a much more straightforward Marvel show that we're used to.
There's no
and WandaVision
magic and reality warping and this and that, when it comes to Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Right. And WandaVision was supposed to be their bridge into Doctor Strange. So I think because the industry and Disney Plus's timeline got shifted, I think that throws us into a more confused state. But it also could be more interesting, because if we're just getting like, oh, here's a typical Marvel thing, like, I don't know how people are going to react to it straight away after Endgame. But I think like the fandom, such as it is having to not struggle, but like they're having to work while they watch the show, right? They're trying to figure out everything. There's a bunch of theories flying around. They have people going back to look at their old comic books if they have them, or if you're like me, you're searching some wikis to try to figure out like, who is this person? What is happening here? And, we'll see how it'll play out. Yeah. So far, it seems to have good reviews, and most people seem to be enjoying it, but there are definitely people who are struggling with it in a way, because I also think they're struggling with it. Like I mentioned before we start recording, like I wished there were more episodes available at a time. Like I enjoyed having 1 into 2 because I felt more grounded in the world.
Or at least a longer episode to encapsulate more things that can be, I guess, that you can latch on to.
Right.
Answer a few questions.
Yeah, like I felt more grounded having episode 1 and 2 together. And at the time when episode 1 and 2 was out, I was able to watch episode 3 because I had screeners. And so I felt like, okay, but now just with episode 3 by itself, I was like, I need episode 4, like right now. So I know like where this is going.
The flow.
And so
I think the flow of it is kind of being that we get to the meat and the meaning, or not the meaning, but what they're really trying to tell you just directly at the end, basically. And then it just stops, so that it leaves even, it brings more questions. On top of the fact, like I think I was speaking about this before when they have this sitcom format, and sitcoms were built to resolve everything within that small little time frame. So it wasn't a large overarching story that you had to come back for in order to figure things out. So with this being in a sitcom format, but you have this large overarching story, it does make it very difficult to understand and to grasp like really what is going on. Even just like the simplest stuff can be like, what is that?
Yeah, which brings us to our commercial break of this episode. Because it is a sitcom episode so far, each episode we've had a commercial break. This one, we have a commercial for Hydra Soak. And it's super reminiscent of the old school Calgon commercials when, an overworked mom or a wife is just like really struggling and she needs a vacation, but she can't go on vacation. And so she takes a nice long bath and has like, Calgon, take me away. So this was very Calgon vibes. But it was a commercial for Hydra Soak. And the tagline was, escape to a world all of your own when you want to get away, but you don't want to go anywhere. Right. And as we know, Hydra is some comic book shit that Rahja will tell
you. Huge villainous organization, Hail Hydra. Captain America fought them in, Captain America has fought them throughout the years, but in the MCU, of course, you had Captain America, the first Avenger, fighting Hydra with your boy, Red Skull. Also in, Age of Ultron, you have Hydra. Also where, Baron Strucker, who was like the leader of Hydra, he's the one who had Wanda and her brother basically captive, I guess you can say, and experimenting on them. Which also begs the question, like, okay, with those experiments, did they actually mutate them in a way which would actually make her a mutant? Or was she just, or is she considered a metahuman, where powers were bestowed upon her?
Yeah, you just lost me.
Hydra Soak, they shouting out Hydra, the evil organization, which could be something that is playing definitely a huge part in all of this, which, in her MCU origins, it has her being with Hydra and this and that. So it could be something that's coming back to wreak havoc.
I think the thing that stood out for me was the whole escape to a world all your own. I think that's really important because we're still trying to figure out whose world is this. We're trying to figure out whose reality is yours. We're trying to figure out whose reality this is. And is Wanda creating it? Is it being created for her to just stay there? So I think that was a really interesting commercial to have in that moment that gives a nod to Marvel's past and maybe Marvel's future. The second half of the episode is basically dedicated to Wanda giving birth.
Oh, before the commercial, her water broke, and
yes, her water breaks.
Raining.
It's like sprinkling.
Yeah. So all the water is coming down in the actual home as opposed to where it should be.
Her water breaks. She dries it up with some supersonic winds, and we move on. So Wanda finally goes into labor for real. Vision is freaking out. He starts levitating, and she calms him down with the breathing exercises. She gets him to come back to the ground. Vision decides to run off literally and get the doctor. And at that point I was like, really, Vision? You gonna super sonic run your way across town? That's gonna expose you as somebody who can run that fast, and you put the dude on your back and run back, but okay. So while Vision is off trying to get the doctor and Wanda's going through the struggle of labor, Geraldine stops by and she says that something crazy happened. All the pipes burst in her house and she needs a bucket to dig her way out. I don't know what a bucket is going to do if all the pipes burst in your house. I got to dig myself
out of this.
So Geraldine stops by to get a bucket from Wanda. And while she's there, it's like the sitcom-y part, like Wanda's in labor, but she's also very, very pregnant, and nobody knows that she's very pregnant. They saw her yesterday, and she absolutely was not pregnant,
trying to hide it.
and today she is. So she's trying to hide the pregnancy. Geraldine is telling this long story about her temp job and helping her boss overcome his hiccups and come up with a campaign for a cereal. And the stork that Wanda's magical powers painted on the wall in the baby's room has come alive and is now walking around. And like Wanda's like trying to shoo the stork out of the room before Geraldine sees it. She covers it in a puff of red dust, and the stork just like, no, I'm good. Red smoke. There you go. And the stork like flaps its wings and is done. Now, if Wanda can make things appear and disappear, why doesn't she just disappear the stork?
Exactly.
I was like, sis, what is happening? You could just turn him into an egg like you did the chicken. Like, get him out of here.
I mean, yeah, that part, which is, you know, I don't know if we should read too much into that or not when it comes to her and her powers and this and that. So I think it was there just for that comedic aspect, you know, with the stork basically running around. She's trying to shoo him away or keep Geraldine from seeing the stork. When she's telling the story, she's like, she talks about how she is trying to scare her boss because her boss has hiccups. And she's like, yeah, I'm trying to scare him. And I'm like, boom. And then Wanda's like, oh, you know, and then the stork, you know, makes a noise and Geraldine hears it. And she's like, oh, wait a minute. Did you hear that? You know, and Wanda's just playing stupid. And then she's like, oh, it was my ice maker in my refrigerator, you know.
Yeah, when Geraldine goes boom or whatever noise she makes, Wanda throws an orange at the stork. And that's she throws like a piece of fruit at the stork because she's using that fruit tray to like cover her belly. Right. And she throws like a grapefruit or orange or something at the stork, and the stork is like, ah! And then like, and Geraldine's like, did you hear that? And then she plays it off like, that's my new ice maker. And Geraldine's like, you fancy. Right. And she just goes back to her story and she's like, I need some office supplies because I got a job. And then she goes into the spare room, which has been turned into the nursery, and the stork resettled itself to the wall. But Geraldine sees like the crib and stuff, and she's like, oh my God, Wanda, you guys are having a baby. And then Wanda like goes into full labor.
Now. We having a baby right now.
Right. And Geraldine, to her credit, she chops and she helps Wanda get through labor and delivery of one of them babies.
The delivery of the baby, while Geraldine is there, Wanda kind of reverts back to her hesitant ways, her anxious ways, and not really committing when she's like, I can't do this, which is something that, you know, she had a problem with when it came to earlier on. In one of the movies, basically when they were fighting Ultron, and Hawkeye had to basically coach her and let her know and give her confidence. And Geraldine does the same thing. She's like, you can do this. You can definitely do this, you know, brings her confidence up in order to deliver the baby. So baby comes out, no umbilical cord. You know why? Because it's TV.
It's TV.
You know, she has a baby boy. And that's when Vision comes in with the doctor on his back, you know, and no one questions any of that, but it's okay. So Geraldine and the doc, she's like, hey, we got to tend to something in the kitchen. You know, Vision walks in and he's like, oh, I missed it, you know, and she's like, don't you want to meet your son with your real face and this and that. So his face reverts back to his regular android face, and then he calls the son Tommy. So basically he concedes the naming of the baby to what Wanda wanted to call her child. And then there's another baby which she gives birth to right then and there. And so, you know, we have twins, which of course Wanda is also a twin, even though her brother sacrificed himself in the movie to save Hawkeye and some other people's lives. So,
and it's nice, lovely scene Vision is super happy. Wanda is happy. The doctor is like, oh my God, we got to turn like you would make a great nurse,
Right.
Geraldine, instead of a doctor. So that's his second
Right.
sexism moment of that
It's low
episode.
key diminishing women.
Instead of being like, you would make a great doctor, he was like, you would make a great nurse. And Wanda and Geraldine kind of look at each other like, okay.
Right.
And then Vision goes to walk the doctor out. At the same time, Geraldine is like, oh my God, Wanda, they're so beautiful. And then Wanda is sort of overcome with emotion. And she's like, I'm a twin.
This is the most important part. So we got through all of that to get to this part of the story.
And Wanda tells Geraldine, well, kind of not really, but really, like she's looking at her twin babies who are in the little bassinet together. And then she says, I was a twin. And Geraldine is kind of just standing there, like listening. And then she's like, yeah, I had a brother, Pietro. And she starts singing to the babies in Sarkovian, I guess. And for some reason, Geraldine is like, when she's listening to Wanda talk about her brother and hearing Wanda sing the song, it's like she comes to some realization and she's like, he was killed by Ultron. And then Wanda's like, what? What did you say? Because again, she's trying to be a normal human person. And Geraldine then's like, what? I said you were a strong woman, Wanda. And she's trying to play it off at this time because I think she knows now, like, she done messed up.
Right.
And Wanda knows she done messed up because she should know this. And then things get complicated.
Right. In that vulnerable moment for Wanda, she didn't lose it, but her mind isn't there, being that she's thinking about her brother, which is probably something she has been trying to forget about and is really in denial about. One of the things that she's probably in denial about. Geraldine says something kind of breaks her out of that. That is something she really doesn't want to hear, being that she says the name Ultron, who is the killer basically of her brother. And, things go haywire at that point while Geraldine is really like trying to roll everything back. And it gets really serious,
It gets very serious because Geraldine is like, let me take a shift with the babies. Like, let me watch the babies. And Wanda was like, no, I don't think so.
Like,
what did you say?
Like, who are you?
And then she's looking at her. Yeah. And then she's looking at her and she sees that Geraldine has this necklace on, which has the sword symbol on the necklace. The necklace is the sword symbol.
Right.
And so now she's questioning Geraldine about, what is this? Who are you? How do you know these things? And Geraldine is like, I, and then cut to outside.
Right, where we see
with my man Herbert Sherbert and homegirl Agnes. And, Vision's on cloud 9 because he just had these babies, even though he can't tell Herbert and Agnes that he just had these babies. Herbert and Agnes are talking and Vision kind of overhears them and it sounds suspicious enough, I guess, that he gets close. And then they're like, is Geraldine in there with Wanda? And then it gets
Vision
weird.
Asks, did you lose power too? And Agnes is like, oh yeah. And then she says something about, her husband and being in the dark or whatever, which is supposed to be like, something funny or whatever. But
she said he looks better in the dark.
But the phrase of losing power, it seems as if like if we are to say that Agnes or Agatha Harkness is a witch, maybe she possibly lost her powers while all these things were going on with Wanda and the contractions and then giving birth and this and that. And then they start asking about Geraldine, like, is she inside? And he's like, yeah, like, what's up? And, Herbert is trying to tell him something. Agnes is like, yeah, she doesn't have a family. She doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have a home. And Vision is like, a home? Like, what do you mean? And Herbert is like, oh, you didn't know? Like, we're all, and he keeps saying that. And eventually Agnes looks him dead in the eyes and tells him to stop it, which I think she kind of gets her powers back and kind of lulls him out of his basically reality break, so he doesn't get to say what he wants to say. Which I'm thinking he was going to say like we're all stuck here or we're all locked in here, basically.
For the record, I think he was gonna say we're all dead, but that's just me.
That is definitely possible. So, you know, and then Agnes basically talks about some marzipan or something like that. Macrame.
Macrame.
Oh, macrame. She got to get back to her macrame, and then Herbert just picks up his saw, his shrub killer, wall killer, and just walks off. He's like, all right, man. And then, you know, Vision is just like, wait a minute, what's going on? So he walks back in. He's like about to ask, or he's asking Wanda, like, where's Geraldine? You know, and Wanda's just sitting there like peacefully. And it's like, oh, she had to rush home, lying to Vision. And then we see a sign. First of all, it goes from daytime in the bubble, the NBA bubble, to outside basically of that reality, and it's nighttime.
Right.
We see a sign that says Westview on the actual sign.
And before that, though, when we're transitioning from the bubble, I like calling it that. Thank you. Transitioning from the bubble to, I guess, real life. We move from the little like sitcom box sign on the TV to like a wider, more modern, like,
This is the
okay,
actual world.
we get the whole screen.
Right.
Yeah, we're moving out of the show, WandaVision, the show within a show, and we're moving into like quote the real world when we see Geraldine come busting through some sort of portal.
Right. And the energy, it looks as if it's you know, that pixelated TV screen that she basically gets thrown out of, lands on the grass. You got trucks pulling up from Sword, helicopters, and you see in the background that there is the big facility, you know, across the street and this and that. So my thing is, I don't think she like, you know, I believe they built something around there and it's not necessarily containing the reality. Or Monica Rambeau gets booted out, Geraldine. She lands on the grass and she's across the street from the Sword facility. So that's just one thing I did notice. And she's kind of dazed and confused or whatever on the floor while everyone is rolling up and the helicopter's got the light on her and this and that, basically, I guess to grab her up.
It looks to me that she comes out of some sort of space portal. Like it's all like lights and like electricity type of deal to me. That she falls out of this space portal, which makes sense if it is Sword because they tackle space, I guess, of some other universe, not quote whatever Shield is doing. It's like Space Shield to us normies, but so that's what it looked like to me. And so that was like the most interesting part outside of the birth of, you know, Tommy and Willie, or no, Tommy and Billy.
Tommy and Willie. Well, William
William
Thomas,
and Willie.
and Billy, which are actually their names in the comic books. There's, I guess, superhero names would be Wiccan and Speed, where Wiccan is Billy and Speed is Thomas. And fun fact, they are a part of the Young Avengers. So there you go.
Yeah. So we know that Monica's, or Geraldine / Monica, is out of this reality.
She's been exiled.
Yeah, we don't know how or why she got in there in the first place. It's unclear if she was like on a mission going into the Westview bubble, or if she was put there and then, you know, she gets caught up in being this person in this reality too. Because it seemed like I know I was on record last episode saying I thought she was lying about saying her name was Geraldine. But if you are undercover, why would you wear a sword symbol necklace?
Right. And where do you get sword necklace jewelry? Where's that store?
Like, but like you would probably have it if you were like a Sword member. But why would you? If you're undercover, yeah, it's like, you know, the cops. If you're undercover though, why would you wear it to your sting operation? Like you wouldn't, right? And so that gives me a little bit of pause of saying Geraldine knew what was up. I think she may have been co-opted by this reality. And then, yeah, I don't know. And then like when Wanda was talking about Pietro and singing the song like that, like snapped her out for a moment and been like, huh,
Right.
like this is familiar. Like I know who you are. Like you were saying, people have snapped out of it.
Right. Right.
Dottie in episode 2 was like, I know you're not who you say you are. Agnes clearly knows
Yeah.
something. Herbert Sherbert knows something. And I think this was just Geraldine's time. And then when she realized the jig was up, she got booted.
She got kicked off the island. Yeah, I think it was more of for me, it was a surprise. Or I should say, in that moment, Wanda's basically in her own world when she's thinking about her brother and the death of her brother. And Geraldine says something, in regards to that. And it's just like, wait a minute, how did you even know that? But the way Geraldine says it, it's almost, I'm not going to say it's almost like a question. It's almost like a realization, like, oh, yeah, Ultron killed Pietro.
Yeah, she says he was killed by Ultron.
Right.
It is more of a realization versus like, oh my God, I slipped up and said something. It was more like, aha, like it did feel like that.
Right. And then with that, trying to roll it back. And in the real reality, Geraldine knows these things. And then, being surprised at that point or having a realization, it's like, oh my God, like I'm actually inside of here. And, I don't want to piss Wanda off because maybe this whole thing this is how powerful she is, So, she's trying to roll it back and really not say anything else. And then Wanda basically just boots her out. And that's that. She's rolling in the dirt. Afro got shrubs in it.
Nah, she was still amazingly beautiful. Shout out to Tiana Paris, still looking.
Oh yeah, no take away from her beauty,
great.
But the Afro got a little shooken up, flying through.
Shooken up and yet still round and well moisturized. We're here for
it. Flying through portals.
All right, that brings us to the end of that episode. Do you have any? I'm like, do you have any outstanding questions? I still have all the questions about what is really happening here.
I mean,
I think that's going to be my question until we move out of the sitcom portion. But I know next week we'll probably be in an 80s sitcom. So
yeah, I want to see how they, reconcile the realizations that have occurred in this episode. With Vision, basically at the end, Vision's like, what happened to Geraldine? It's very concerning, I should say. Who's next to glitch?
I wonder if Wanda is going to tell him the truth.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Wanda.
I think
wants to be here.
That'll be a big test.
She is definitely, in denial when it comes to things, and she wants this is for me. It's almost this is what it is that she wants it to be, like what she has envisioned. Wanda vision, her vision of her and Vision, and she's trying to basically play that out and be left alone to a certain degree. But I think her mental state is deteriorating more and more every time, something occurs and these unexpected things pop up that kind of pull her back to what, the real reality is, so pretty sure we're going to see some type of true mental breakdown at some point. And forgive me because, I do have a foundation in the source material, and they are definitely pulling a lot from source material when it comes to certain stories in the comic books, like House of M, which is Wanda's story with Vision and this and that. A lot of things are happening. So I'm just excited to see exactly where this goes, how they're going to pull it all together. Are we going to see some episodes where we're not so confused, So I guess we'll see. I'm definitely going to stay tuned. So hope everyone else does the same.
Yep. And when you do stay tuned, you come back to have this conversation and listen to us have this conversation and send us your feedback and questions and emails. And when we hit whatever podcast platform you're listening on, you give us a nice, dope 5-star review and some kind words to help us spread the word about We Be Watching.
Yay, yay.
You did it. He was trying to play me.
Since you didn't say it this whole time, so I guess I have to put it in there.
Gotta put it in there.
I got you.
Before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to share about?
Not really. I'm really just wanting to get to the next episode to see how, if some things get explained more and more, or we're going to still be going through these little glitches and moments that continue to present more questions. So we'll see.
Same. I think now that we're out, we have at least 1 foot outside of the Westview bubble. I think we'll start to get more information because Geraldine / Monica is out of the bubble. She's like the Houston Rockets in the second round of the playoffs. So better yet, shots fired. She's like the Clippers who got sent home. But
terrible.
I think we'll start to get Laker gang. I think we'll start to get more information about what exactly is happening, hopefully in the next episode. Either way, we're fully committed to it. We're definitely watching, and we hope that you watch and listen along with us. Once again, if you have questions, if you have feedback, if you got some nice things to say, you can hit us up on Twitter and on Instagram at WeBeWatchingPod. You can also send us an email at webewatchingpod@gmail.com. And we will catch you next time. Stay tuned.
We are committed to you.
For the children. I'm Britni Danielle.
And I'm Rahja.
Peace. Yay, yay.